Good afternoon and welcome back to the Public Service Commission. This afternoon we are continuing in the hearing in docket number 2023-1-E. Before we begin, let's take a roll call of commissioners. With us virtually we have Commissioner Irvin and Commissioner Caston. Present in the hearing room we have Commissioner Justin Williams, Vice Chair Powers, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Carol Williams, and Chair Belser. Where we left off, we have a panel. Welcome back, gentlemen. And we're still on Commissioner questions, and I'll recognize Commissioner Caston.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, gentlemen. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. This afternoon, fascinating questions and answers. Really, many of my questions were asked and answered, but the back and forth did generate some questions. So I'm gonna go through them rather quickly, if okay, and answer best you can. And they may be all over the place. Just bear with me if that's okay. Mr. Houston, I believe in some question with Commissioner Thomas relative to reliability and security of nuclear fuel sources. Was your answer that there are uranium mines in North America, and if there was appropriate incentive, which I assume would be a bigger and better market, these mines would be expanded? Is that what you said?
There are mines in North America, uranium mines, but I was speaking more globally. There are 4 different segments of nuclear fuel production. There's uranium mining, and there's a chemical conversion of that uranium ore into a form that you can enrich or concentrate. And then there's enrichment of that, and then fabrication. Uranium mining is one that is more fungible. There are more uranium mines spread out globally. What I was really speaking to in terms of incentivization, there's some of that needed throughout all of the nuclear fuel supply chain, but more particularly, enrichment is the one that has probably the biggest lead time and could be the one that we're paying particularly close attention to, because those are the ones that are probably most impacted by geopolitical evolutions with Ukraine, Russia, and those type of things. So that primarily was what my focus of that comment was.
So does there seem to be a move or interest in, I guess, enrichment facilities elsewhere or development?
The enrichers globally, our Western allies, are expanding, and they do have plans, and they are already spending money and doing work in that regard to expand that capacity. Personally, I would also like to see some in the U.S. as well. That's even more of an insulation against particular trade issues or trade imbalances, even among Western allies.
Why are there not more or any in the U.S.?
There's primarily been just a need, a supply-demand signal that whether it was needed or not.
Okay.
With the way. Okay.
No, that's okay. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, that is the short of it. It's just not been a demand signal that's been there to make it the business case for it.
I understand. Mr. McKay, I think this be a question for you or anyone really. In multiple hearings, there's been much discussion on hedging. There seems to be various and different philosophies amongst the electric utilities. Is there one right way for an electric utility to secure least cost fuel supplies?
I guess a lot of it's very variable at what you're buying, where you're buying it. Um, Hedging is, I believe, a prudent practice. Um, to mitigate that, give you more fuel certainty and mitigate price spikes. But there's many different ways of doing it as well, um, different products. And I think, it's one thing procuring your gas and making sure that you have enough gas, but it's another thing guarding the price. That's kind of totally different. The two are independent. Having fuel security, obviously, gas security is important. And I would think what goes hand in hand with that is protecting the price as well as best you can for the customer.
Understand. Does hedging guarantee lower fuel costs to the customers?
Hedging is just an insurance. As I always say, it's never guaranteed to make or lose money, but it's just, it's insurance.
Would you agree, though, that well, let me ask the question. You may, whether you agree or not. Is it the electric utility's responsibility, by whatever method they use, to try to get the best fuel cost they can for the customer?
Yes, I agree.
I'm listening to the questions and responses on economic dispatch, base load reserves. I believe that what I'm hearing from DEP is that the company uses the most economical dispatch, baseload reserves, the most economic generation dispatch, independent of the generation type. Is that correct?
Right. It's however it falls in the stack. You're right. They all have different parameters, different costs associated with them, and they're dispatched accordingly.
All right, and hearing the conversation, and looking at the testimony too, where you talk about the dynamic dispatch and the stochastic modeling. Am I assuming correctly that this process of getting the most economic dispatch uses this dynamic dispatch, which is for coal fuel only, I think you said, and this probabilistic modeling, the stochastic modeling that looks at fuel, weather, and a host of other variables to help make that determination. Is that a true statement? Is that correct?
Yes.
Does this stochastic modeling, does it look at short term, like, when you talk about looking at the next, 5-7 days, week out, is it long term, short term, or both?
Yeah, so for the dynamic dispatch, it's looking out about 17, 18 months. So that was a step change for us. We're normally looking at 3 or 4 months. So it's giving you, it's trying to align the spot price with, your planning for inventory deliveries, and make sure that you fall within the bounds of the inventory levels of inventory possibilities at the plants, at each plant.
And that's the dynamic.
Yes, for the coal.
As far as your stochastic modeling, looking at the most economic dispatch, is that used short term, looking a week, 2 weeks ahead, or is that looking at longer time periods?
It's looking at 7-day period.
Okay, 7 times, that's right. In response to questions from Commissioner Carolyn Williams relative to renewables, you stated hydro was a good source as a peak shaver. Can you briefly explain why that's the case?
In some cases, cold winter morning, you know, it's economically it's useful for for shaving those 7 o'clock in the morning peaks, and usually because prices are at their highest, and during the peaks, and then they'll if it's pump storage, they'll use it. They'll pump when the prices are the least cost.
Okay. Is stored water turning a turbine?
Right.
You also mentioned the intermittency of solar as requiring a workaround, and I think that, you said battery storage may help mitigate this. Is this correct?
Yes, it's just a possibility.
That got me thinking, I guess, about the dispatch and economics and everything. Has the increased amount of solar altered or had any effect on the economic dispatch? Either helped it be more economical, made it less economical, or is it neutral, or is it had any effect at all?
It's hard to say. I don't know if I can answer that question. I don't really know. I mean, on the surface, you would think that, it's the solar it's there, it's free, it's maybe in the summertime, it's going to displace more expensive energy for sure. That makes sense. Other times it might come on when you don't need it, in which case it wouldn't be so. So, depends.
Okay. And if I understood Mr. Flanagan correctly, he stated he and his group's role is to make sure the generation units work when called upon. And I think you and your unit's role was to let his groups know what generation to use. Is that correct?
Right. In our planning models that we send out, that's correct. We have an hourly plan of what unit's supposed to run when and how and at what level, and then obviously in the real time that gets transferred over to the energy control centers who actually manage it real time, and it might be a little different. They'll make the decisions.
Understand. On page 6, lines 8 to 10 of your direct testimony, you discussed the instability of the coal supply chain along with the transition of the domestic utility generation fleet away from coal as a baseline generation. Are you talking about nationally a transition away from coal as a baseline generation, or DEP transitioning away from that, or both?
Yeah, I think nationally for sure. There's a big movement towards renewables, obviously, and natural gas and other forms of energy. And the company obviously is also looking at it as well in the IRP.
Well, why do you think that transition is? Is it because coal is becoming not economical? I mean, what seems to be driving that?
Well, after a while, it does become, I'd say, in terms of fuel source reliability, the coal market is starting. It has been shrinking for years. That's one reason, for sure. And supply is very. The supply chain is broken. You see the producers moving away from it as well. They're moving towards metallurgical coal production and trying to diversify overseas, as well as the railroads too. They've also been transitioning away from relying on steady coal deliveries. Although they're there for us, but for sure their business models are changing.
Okay. I understand. And maybe this is, well, I'll let you answer the question. Is it more economical for DEP to use coal facilities as reserves, or however you use them, rather than for baseload now?
I think, while we have them, you want to use them, but it also depends on the cost, right? The overall cost to generate power. At some point, if it becomes too expensive, then we don't run them and they become reserves until you need them.
But with your modeling and engineers and everything else, I mean, you kind of know if the plants are functioning well or maintained or economical now, or maybe how long that'll last. Do you or do you not?
No, hopefully they do last. And I know that, that's what we have our strategy group and our IRP group as well, looking at sort of the bigger picture like that right now.
Okay. And I think in other hearings, it seems like we've heard that, worldwide construction of coal plants is rapidly increasing, which sounds counterintuitive to what here now. Is that true or false?
Yes, I think in certain areas, even in China still, but their access to different fuel, like natural gas, is a lot more limited than our access. So I think they're trying to build with what the units that they can get the fuel for. So yeah, I've read the same thing, and yes, they're big importers of coal.
So the coal supply, as far as domestic coal supply, I'm understanding you, isn't the issue. It is pretty much the supply chain and just the lack of supply chain.
I'd say, yeah, supply chain, as well as just the some of these coal suppliers used to be able to get financing to make as much coal and mine as much coal as possible, and now a lot of that money, that financing money, that upfront capital money, has gone to other areas, renewables, and there's other incentives as well to switch away from coal. So they're trying to, I think, they're trying to survive, but they're also running into, as I mentioned before, a lot of resource restrictions, as well as inflation, equipment inflation, and so they're struggling.
But the bottom line is DEP uses the most economic dispatch regardless of the generation source or type.
They use the most
Correct.
economic. Yes, I agree with that statement.
Well, that's Mr. Simmerl. I don't think I'm ignoring you. I don't want you to think that, but I don't have any questions. And I appreciate you gentlemen bearing with me, and thank you so much, Madam Chair. I have no more questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, any further questions for this panel?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Justin Williams?
just want to confirm from I guess with you, but also with the panel, that someone was going to answer this question regarding substantial increased costs during Winter Storm Elliott, and how and why that happened. I don't. Can any of the panelists here answer that question? Increased fuel costs during Winter Storm Elliott, and how and why that happened.
I think Is that going to delve into some confidential information, Ms. Brown?
Commissioners, I think if what you're asking for is the costs, which is what it sounds like, witness Harrington will be able to speak to that non-confidentially on the next panel.
Okay. And if we have to get into confidential information, we will close the session. And to that extent, does that answer your question, Commissioner Williams?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. And let me just finish this here. Ms. Brown, any redirect for the panel?
No redirect.
Okay. Gentlemen, y'all may stand down. And Ms. Brown, if we could, because Mr. McClay indicated that he knew the answer but was concerned about asking, I would ask that he hang around until in case we need him in the closed session, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen, y'all may stand down. Thank you. Mr. Traywick, you look like you're getting up.
There we go. Yep. Can you hear me now? All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. The company would next call Ms. Dana Harrington, Ms. Kiva Hibbert, and Ms. Wendy Fleener to the stand as a panel.
Either way.
Either way.
Would you raise your right hands, please? Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, Ms. Harrington. Would you please state your name for the record? By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Ms. Harrington, I'm not sure that microphone is on. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we need to start over?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Ms. Harrington, will you please state your name for the record?
Dana Harrington.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I am employed by Duke Energy, and I am a rates and regulatory strategy manager.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 22 pages of direct testimony that were pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
I did.
And if I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
They would.
Okay. Were there any corrections that you made?
I made one correction in my pre-filed rebuttal testimony.
Okay. Thank you. Other than those changes, would your answers be the same?
They would.
Madam Chair, I would ask that Ms. Harrington's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Ms. Harrington's pre-filed direct testimony will be received into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Harrington, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 14 exhibits that were filed with your pre-filed direct testimony?
I did.
Do you have any changes to those exhibits at this time?
I do not.
Madam Chair, I would ask that Ms. Harrington's pre-filed exhibits submitted with her direct testimony be entered as the next composite exhibit.
Ms. Harrington's pre-filed direct exhibits denoted Harrington Exhibit 1 all the way through Harrington Exhibit 14 will be marked for identification as hearing exhibit number 5 and received into the evidence of this case.
Ms. Harrington, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 3 pages of rebuttal testimony that were pre-filed with the commission?
I did.
If I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed rebuttal testimony, would your answers be the same?
They would.
Madam Chair, I would ask that Ms. Harrington's pre-filed rebuttal testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Ms. Harrington's pre-filed rebuttal testimony will be entered into the record as if given orally.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Harrington, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 3 exhibits submitted with your rebuttal testimony?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes to those exhibits at this time?
I do not.
Madam Chair, I'd ask that Ms. Harrington's pre-filed rebuttal exhibits be entered into the evidence as the next composite hearing exhibit.
Ms. Harrington's pre-filed rebuttal testimony, pre-filed rebuttal exhibits captioned as Revised Exhibit 1, Revised Exhibit 2, and Revised Exhibit 3 will be marked for identification as Hearing Exhibit 6 and admitted into the record of this case.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Harrington, would you please provide a summary of your direct and rebuttal testimonies for the Commission?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The purpose of my testimony is to provide Duke Energy Progress's base fuel costs, capacity-related costs, variable environmental costs, DERP avoided costs, and DERP incremental costs for the actual period of March 1st, 2022 through February 28th, 2023, the estimated period of March 1st, 2023 through July 31st, 2023, the projected billing period of August 1st, 2023 through July 31st, 2024, and the proposed fuel and fuel-related cost factors. The prospective component of the base fuel rate that DEP is recommending for the billing period is 2.133 cents per kilowatt hour to recover the South Carolina retail share of $1.4 billion in projected system fuel expense. The anticipated base fuel under collection at July 31st, 2023 is approximately $51 million. The retrospective component of the base fuel rate that DEP recommends to recover the under-collected balance is 0.802 cents per kilowatt hour. The recommended total base fuel rate of 2.935 cents per kilowatt hour is uniform for all South Carolina customer classes. These recommended rates do not include gross receipts taxes or regulatory fees. The South Carolina retail share of capacity-related costs, environmental costs, DERP avoided costs, and DERP incremental costs are allocated to South Carolina retail customer classes based on the firm coincident peak of the prior calendar year. Consistent with the Commission's order in the recently approved DEP South Carolina base rates case, docket number 2022-254-E, the transition from a 1 summer coincident peak allocation factor to a 12 coincident peak allocation factor has been reflected in the proposed rates as of April 1st, 2023, which was the date the new base rates became effective. For the billing period, projected South Carolina retail capacity-related costs are approximately $31.2 million, environmental costs are approximately $1.4 million, and DERP avoided costs are approximately $137,000. As of July 31st, 2023, the South Carolina retail anticipated capacity-related under collection is approximately $3.8 million. The anticipated environmental under collection is approximately $150,000. The anticipated DERP avoided cost over collection is approximately $1,000. When combined, the recommended capacity-related, environmental, and DERP avoided cost rates by customer class are 0.961 cents per kilowatt hour for residential customers, 0.701 cents per kilowatt hour for general service non-demand customers, and $1.70 per kW for general service demand customers. Billing period DERP incremental costs, which are allocated 100% to South Carolina retail customers, are projected to be approximately $3.2 million. The anticipated DERP incremental under collection at July 31st, 2023 is approximately $336,000. The recommended billing period monthly DERP per account charges are $1 for residential customers, $2.84 for commercial customers, and $100 for industrial customers. These DERP incremental rates include gross receipts tax and regulatory fees. The residential and industrial customer classes have reached the per account cost caps established in Act 236. The company's actual period base fuel costs, capacity-related costs, environmental costs, and DERP costs are reasonable and reflect the company's continuing efforts to maintain reliable electric service in an efficient manner while complying with Commission-approved renewable energy initiatives, thereby minimizing the total cost to South Carolina retail customers. The impact of the rates set forth in my direct testimony for an average residential customer using 1,000 kilowatt hours per month is an increase of $5.55 per month, or 3.7%. The increases in the average monthly bill for the remaining South Carolina retail customer classes are 1.1% for general service non-demand customers, 2.5% for general service demand customers, and 0.5% for lighting customers. In my rebuttal testimony, I addressed ORS's findings of 2 calculation inconsistencies between estimates and actuals in my direct testimony and corrected 1 misstatement in my direct filing. To rectify the calculation inconsistencies for the record, I filed 3 revised exhibits for informational purposes, but did not request to update the rates recommended for approval from those in my direct testimony. This concludes the summary of my direct and rebuttal testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Harrington. Ms. Hibbert, would you please state your name for the record?
Kiva Hibbert.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm a lead rates and regulatory analyst at Duke Energy Business Services, LLC.
And Ms. Hibbert, did you prepare a cause to be prepared 8 pages of direct testimony that were pre-filed with the commission?
I did.
If I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Madam Chair, I'd ask that Ms. Hibbert's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Ms. Hibbert's pre-filed direct testimony will be received into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Hibbert, did you also prepare a cause to be prepared 1 exhibit that was attached to your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes to that exhibit?
No, I do not.
Madam Chair, I'd ask that Ms. Hibbert's pre-filed exhibit submitted with her direct testimony be marked as the next composite hearing exhibit.
Ms. Hibbert's Exhibit 1, Hibbert Exhibit 1 will be marked for identification as hearing exhibit number 7 and received into the evidence of this case.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Hibbert, will you please provide a summary of your direct testimony at this time?
The purpose of my testimony is to discuss 1 of the 11 components of the value of distributed energy resources, or DER, avoided cost contained in the net energy metering or NEM methodology. 2, changes to the value of DER methodology made since DEP's 2022 fuel proceeding. And 3, the update to the NEM administrative charge. Applying the avoided cost methodology and rates approved by the Commission in Order Number 2022-330, as well as updated input assumptions, the company has updated the 2023 value of NEM DER to $0.03754 per kilowatt hour for schedules RES, RTOUD, and RTOU-CPP, $0.03716 for schedule SGS, and $0.03802 for all other schedules. The calculation used to determine the value of NEM DER is consistent with the methodology approved in Order Number 2015-194 and as updated in Order Number 2021-569. The company has identified the cost of the following components of NEM DER as valued at 0: avoided CO2 emissions cost, fuel hedge, utility integration and interconnection cost, utility administration, and environmental costs. However, the company has developed a non-zero value for avoided transmission and distribution, or T&D, capacity costs in this year's proceeding. The avoided T&D capacity values were calculated by analyzing the impacts of rooftop solar on peak demands and then applying DEP's energy efficiency demand-side management value for avoided T&D capacity to the results. New data tools, including the ISOP data system, enabled the company to evaluate the impact of NEM DERs on the T&D systems to calculate the values. Further, the company has updated the value of NEM DER based on the avoided cost methodology and avoided cost rates approved in Order Numbers 2019-881A and 2020-315A. The NEM administrative charge was reduced from $4.86 per customer per month to $2.43 per customer per month due to savings the company realized after transitioning from manual billing to automated billing of customers being served on Rider R&M. This concludes my testimony summary.
Thank you, Ms. Hibbert. Ms. Fleener, would you please state your name for the record?
Wendy Fleener.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I am Director of Clean Energy at Duke Energy Carolinas, LLC.
Ms. Fleener, did you prepare or cause to be prepared 6 pages of direct testimony that were pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
I did.
If I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Madam Chair, I'd ask that Ms. Fleener's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Ms. Fleener's pre-filed direct testimony will be received into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Fleener, would you please provide a summary of your direct testimony at this time?
Yes. The purpose of my testimony is to provide a brief update on the status of the customer programs DEP implemented to meet the goals of Act 236. DEP fully dispersed its allotted 13,000 kW in solar rebates to South Carolina recipients with its final payment in December 2021. The rebates will continue to be amortized with carrying costs over a 15-year period through November 2036. The Incremental Distributed Energy Resource Program, or DIRP, costs associated with the solar rebate program are the amortization of rebates paid, carrying costs on deferred amounts, and the general and administrative expenses required to manage the program. The amortization amounts and carrying costs were adjusted in accordance with Order Number 2023-138. DEP also dedicated 1,000 kW of 2 purchase power agreements entered into pursuant to the utility scale goals of Act 236 to the Shared Solar Program. The first facility became operational in December 2017, and the second facility became operational in March 2020. The standard offering of this Shared Solar Program is fully subscribed at 80 customers, accounting for 600 kW alternating current, or AC. To increase accessibility to the program, DEP also offers a low moderate income, or LMI, customer program through which it waives the application fee and initial subscription charge for 200 qualified customers. The LMI program is 99% subscribed at 198 customers, accounting for 400 kWAC. If the LMI program becomes fully subscribed, the company will maintain a waiting list to have access to capacity should it become available. This program has a 10-year life and will expire in August 2028. The incremental DIRP costs associated with the Shared Solar Program include the amount of subsidy utilized to the lower subscription fees for program participants, the cost of purchased power in excess of avoided cost on the subscribed portion of the PPA, and general administrative costs of managing the program. The avoided cost associated with the Shared Solar Program is the avoided cost of the purchased power on the subscribed portion of the PPA. Since the Commission approved the company's DIRP application in 2015, DEP has utilized various communication and outreach tools to ensure solar stakeholders and retail customers have access to the information about the company's DIRP programs. This includes my testimony summary.
Thank you, Ms. Fleener. Madam Chair, the panel is available for questioning from council and the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Trawick. Newcore Steel, no questions? South Carolina Coastal Conservation League and Southern Alliance for Clean Energy?
No questions.
Thank you. Office of Regulatory Staff?
No questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions for this panel? Commissioners? Commissioner Justin Williams?
What happened? Colleagues got a little shy there. Ms. Harrington, you've been in here since the beginning of the proceeding, and you heard the discussion regarding Winter Storm Elliott.
Yes, sir.
And the potential increased costs related to the actions or inactions of the company. Could you tell us whether or not there were any increased costs that you're seeking to pass on to customers based on Winter Storm Elliott?
Yes, sir. Thank you for your question. What I can report is the reliability purchases that we made during December, between the period of December 24th through the 26th. And by nature, reliability is just to maintain our reserve capacity, so to keep the lights on, basically, just maintain that reliability. So reliability is further reaching than just a winter storm. So I want to use the word reliability because that's the numbers I have available. And under the circumstances, I believe it's all in Winter Storm Elliott is all inclusive of those 3 days of these numbers I'm going to speak to. But I just want to shed some light that reliability can occur outside, a reliability purchase can occur outside of a storm or outside of the circumstances we're speaking at in regards to your question. So the company procured $6.6 million of purchased reliability purchases between the dates of December 24th through the 26th. That would have been DEP exclusive. And South Carolina's share of that would be approximately $600,000. So again, these are purchases made in the market to supply load that was necessary for South Carolina retail customers under that point in time. Does that answer your full question?
I'm not sure. I'm working through it in my
Sure.
mind, digesting that. Now, when you say what you can or what you can't answer, what are you talking about?
Well, I just wanted to say I've got reliability. I was looking for reliability purchases, which is what we would deem a purchase under these circumstance to maintain the adequate reserve margin. That's just the language in the fuel statute says different ways, different reasons that we go out into the market and purchase energy. One of which is to maintain maintain an adequate reserve margin. So the purchases that we made during Winter Storm Elliott was indeed to maintain an adequate reserve margin. So it fell under those semantics of the fuel statute. Does that answer your question? So what I'm saying is that label of reliability purchases is broader than just Winter Storm Elliott, but the purchases made during Winter Storm Elliott were reliability purchases. Is that helpful?
Oh yeah. I'm just working through it in my mind.
Okay.
I heard you say, and I could have misheard you,
Okay.
but I heard you say what I can report, and I'm making sure that I'm not misunderstanding that there's something that you think you can't report.
I gotcha. I thank you. So I'm looking at the month of December. My goal was to look at the month of December in general because that's our target range of time. And my go-to place for purchases made under any this circumstance we speak of is the reliability purchase bucket. So I inquired as to what reliability purchases did we make between December 24th and the 26th to encompass Winter Storm Elliott. We could have had reliability purchases outside of Winter Storm Elliott. We had approximately $500,000 that incurred in the first half of the month. So a reliability purchase isn't just during a winter storm. It's to maintain an adequate reserve margin. So my numbers that I'm providing for you of $6.6 million that incurred between the 24th and the 26th of December as a system for DEP are the numbers I'm giving you are reliability purchases. We could have had a sliver of that outside of the winter storm. It's not. I'm not suggesting it's only isolated winter storm reliability purchases. Does that make sense? Is that helpful? I mean, maybe I could try this another way. I think if we were trying to really get granular about Winter Storm Elliott, what I would need to do, or the way I would go about that is I would look at all of our units that were available for use, and then I would see who was not available for use, and then what quantification of energy did not get supplied because it was not available for use during the hours of the storm. And then I would look parallel to that, what did we buy in the market during those hours? And that would be the only way I would be able to tell you of the $6.6 million, 100% assured it was Winter Storm Elliott motivated. Does that help?
Everything you said
Okay.
helped.
I'm sorry.
You realize I'm at a strategic disadvantage in that you know way more than I do.
Okay.
So
I'm trying to make clear that I'm not excluding anything. I may be including more than you're asking for by calling it a reliability purchase because that's the numbers I have in front of me. But I would it's a fair assumption that everything that we purchased during those 3 days were Winter Storm Elliott related. That was the driver at the time.
yeah, you're doing a great job.
Okay.
I'm just trying to catch up. You're
Okay.
you're way further ahead than I am.
Sorry.
So no need to apologize. I'm just catching up to what you're saying.
Okay.
Now, something that I'm hearing, and I don't know if I'm hearing it correctly or not, so I'm going to clarify and confirm with you. I believe I heard you say if I were to compare, if I were to identify the cost directly related to Winter Storm Elliott, I would do this and I would do that. Why haven't you done that?
Well, there were no recommended disallowances in this case, so I didn't need to. Again, I could circle back to the numbers that we have in front of us. For DEP, it was $6.6 million, which is a sizable purchase, but under the circumstances, I think it's as small as it is because there wasn't energy available to purchase. I think that's the reason we had some of the rolling blackouts. Now, I am the fuel person and the numbers person, but I'm not the judgment person. So as to what we could buy, I'm not knowledgeable on. I apologize. But
Apologize.
Okay.
You all have been prepped very well on what you are not an expert on. You
I'm sorry.
very clearly let us know. It's not just you. I appreciate it.
Okay. But
But who is the judgment person?
yeah, the how and the why you mentioned earlier. I'm the what. So the what is $6.6 million. 600,000 approximately is South Carolina. It would be Mr. McClay.
Good. I'm glad he's still here. All right.
Yes.
Please keep going.
So you said, why haven't I done that? I think all the costs are prudently incurred. I didn't suspect any reason to need to slice and dice those purchases for any imprudency review. I deemed them prudently. I mean, I feel like we would have purchased more energy in the market if it had been available. So these costs would have actually been larger had we had access to more energy. So I deemed these very moderate under the circumstances.
Okay. I have more questions. I don't know if I'm going to ask them or not.
Okay.
I broke the ice. I think my colleagues are ready to engage you, so
Okay.
I'm going to give them that opportunity.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
I'll go next. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Ms. Hibbert and Ms. Fleener, you're off the hook right now. Ms. Harrington's got the center hot seat. So,
Okay.
Ms. Harrington, you referenced the fuel statute and reliability purchases. Where in the fuel statute is that term used?
To maintain an adequate reserve margin is my recollection of the fuel statute. So that's one of the purchase parameters upon which we run a purchase through the fuel clause is under the circumstance of to maintain an adequate reserve margin. So that's what I was using as my doorway to labeling something a reliability purchase.
And during December 24 through the 26th, is it am I understanding your testimony that Duke or DEP only purchased $6.6 million on the market?
Of reliability
Okay,
purchases.
what about the rest of the energy? How much more?
That's I don't have the December monthly fuel report with me, but that would be the
How long
items.
does it take to get that?
Someone could probably pull it off the commission website.
Okay.
As we're
Let me ask you this. I'm looking at your Harrington exhibit number 2.
okay. Of direct. Okay.
I don't know that it's changed. I didn't compare it to the.
It wouldn't. Well, I did the yeah. We can. I
I'm
can let
looking
you know.
at purchase power, so I hope that didn't change.
Sure. Let's see here.
I'm on page 2 of your exhibit 2.
It's this one.
I don't think that changed. You with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and I'm looking at line 29, purchased power.
Yes, ma'am.
And for December 2022, what was that amount?
$85 million.
Okay. And I understand that November might be considered a kind of the end of a shoulder month there, but there seems to be a significant increase for December over November and then January. Would you agree with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I think that we will get some testimony. Have you read through ORS's testimony
Yes,
in
ma'am.
this docket? Okay. And you recognize we probably read through that too.
Yes.
So there have been comments that there were, and we've heard some of this earlier, that there were derating of some generation plants.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
You're aware
Yes,
of
ma'am.
that?
During the winter storm, Elliott?
Yes.
Yes.
Let's focus on Winter Storm Elliott.
Yes, ma'am.
There was some derating of the plants. There were some plants that they couldn't even get online or that shut down because of various whatever, freezing temperatures and things. And so, and maybe we need to bring Mr. McClay back up here, but did DEP have to purchase electricity to meet the needs other than these reliability purchases that you've spoken to?
Yes, but that would be our normal course of business purchases. Those would be like from Duke Energy Carolinas, the JDA transfers when Duke Energy Carolinas supplies energy to Duke Energy Progress and vice versa. So this is all inclusive of the normal course of business purchases.
I understand, but the question, what I'm trying to get to, and is because plants derated or went offline or didn't come online, DEP didn't have, and probably the same thing with DEC, but we're not talking about DEC today. DEP didn't have enough energy to supply its customers.
That's correct.
So they had to go out and buy it on the market, even though it was pretty scarce. Is that correct?
It was very scarce.
Yes. And some contracts, I think the testimony was, y'all may have had some contracts and people couldn't deliver what they were supposed to.
I believe that's true.
How much of that is in this $85 million?
$6.6 million. I mean, the one I was providing. Now, yes, the $6.6 million is the reliability purchases for the month that were earmarked as to maintain an adequate reserve margin. So any other purchases we would have made for economic purposes or.
But this is the point. Because Duke's generation fleet was down for whatever reason. Either the coal derated it or the plant didn't operate, Duke had to go out and buy.
Right.
And at what price and how much over what they would have done if they'd been able to generate it. That's the delta there.
Right.
Yes,
I don't believe it's as much as you would expect.
It may not be,
because
but I'm just trying to figure that out.
Yes, because it wasn't available. So I do think it's 6.6 million is what I've been told. And I looked at the date range. So I isolated the 24th through the 26th, and I didn't capture the other 28 days of the month. So the other 28 days of the month do substantiate the 85 million that we're looking at here. Yes, that was 85 million. I'm not used to wearing my glasses. So the 85 million, that would be the other 28 days of the month, in addition to any economic purchases made between DEC and DEP, even during the 3 days, just basically anything that, and some reliability that occurred in days other than the 24th. So like I mentioned earlier, $500,000 of DEP purchases or reliability, that label I gave it earlier, to maintain an adequate reserve margin prior to Winter Storm Elliott. So we've got a lot. My numbers show that 6.6 million were made of reliability purchases, meaning something we went out and procured to maintain an adequate reserve margin from the 24th to the 26th was 6.6 million. So I just think it's lower than we would like it to be because we didn't have more available to buy.
Have you reviewed ORS's testimony?
I've read it. I don't know what you...
Well,
yeah.
I mean, do you remember one of ORS witnesses filing confidential testimony and having a price in the testimony of what was paid per kilowatt hour?
I don't remember their number, but I mean, I've got a number myself. We could compare.
Well, the reason I'm asking is, does it cost DEP when their generating plants are running? Does it cost that much?
No, ma'am.
No. That's a huge number, is it not?
Per hour, it is. Okay. Yes.
I'm trying to figure out, because Duke's plants were down, and some of the recommendations made from ORS's witness, that's the delta I want. How much was spent on electricity or power at that rate because of the weather causing Duke's plants to be down or derated or whatever reason?
Right. Again, if I were trying to do that with these values that I've gotten, I have. If you tasked me with the late filed exhibit on this, what I would do.
We're going to stay here till we get it.
Okay. What I would do is I would take all the units, as I mentioned earlier, take all the units that were forecasted to be available, say 7 days in advance, maybe 2 weeks in advance, were forecasted to be available during the time frame, the hours we're looking for that are under discussion. I would you'd have to take my $85 million and isolate it down to our window we want to look at. And then I would quantify how much energy wasn't produced by each one of the units that should have been available but wasn't. And then marry those hours and that gen up with what was purchased for that hour and that day, and see how those pair up. So, and as you noted, the incremental delta. What's the incremental delta in cost? Because there would have been a cost had those units been available for self-generation.
Has Duke concluded it, to your knowledge, has Duke concluded its investigation on Winter Storm Elliott?
I do not. I think that's still open.
Are you aware that ORS's investigation is still open?
I do. I'm aware that docket's still open. Or however you guys call that, a non-docket or something.
Yeah,
Sure.
You're right. It's got an ND number for
Yes.
non-docket at this point.
I believe that's still open, is what to my
Correct.
understanding.
Correct.
Yes.
That's all I have at the moment. Commissioners? Commissioner
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Caston?
Madam Chair. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Harrington.
Good afternoon.
I'm not trying to pile on, but
That's okay.
you listened to the discussion, and I had very similar thoughts that have already been asked, and I think you've actually kind of summarized what I was thinking, the method how to answer Chair Belser's question and Commissioner Williams' question. We just previously, I think, heard testimony about how DEP does their economic dispatch using probabilistic models and various and sundry things to do that. And I guess the question that's asked and been asked, and I think you've actually answered, but you haven't developed a number, and I understand that right now, but if the company's facilities did not drop out of service, would the energy costs have been higher or lower than they were with the dropping out of service?
Well, I think we would have incurred more revenues because we would have made more sales. So we would have spent more fuel, but by hour, it would have been cheaper. But by revenues, we would have spent less fuel, because you see what I'm saying? We would have spent more fuel to incur more energy, to produce more energy.
Well,
Is that?
I think I'm where Chair Belser has stated, and I think you rightfully stated, I think, is that the only way to do this is to look at what would have been if the appropriate units would have been functioning at the appropriate level in the appropriate way, and what the difference is with that not occurring, not just due to reliability, the 6.6 or whatever, but all of the cost involved beyond what could have been, should have been. Does that make sense?
I'm not quite sure. When you say all of the costs involved, what are you alluding to? Just the fuel?
Pretty much what you defined to Chair Belcher and what you would have to do to make that determination of what that number is. I'm inclined to agree with you. That's what it would take to get that number that she's talking about.
Right, and then as Commissioner Williams asked, we do want to keep prudency under consideration as well. So we want to scrutinize, were we to lay all that out hour by hour, kilowatt hour by kilowatt hour, date by date, hour by hour, purchase by unit, purchases, offsetting units, all of that arrangement. We do want to take that effort under the concept of there is an imprudency to find here. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't look myself because I didn't deem there was an imprudency to find, because I would assume that's the value of the analysis.
I understand that, and I believe that's what ORS's study part of that will be looking at that, and I assume DEP's internal study will be looking at that as far as prudency. And I'm sure the investigations will look at this also, but as was mentioned in previous hearings, I think, is that this winter storm should not have caught anyone by surprise, because the whole country knew it for about a week. Now, do bad things happen? Yes, they do. I mean, nothing's perfect. And no one's trying to say that it should be or should have been. But when it comes to prudency, I think that will be defined when it's evaluated a little more in depth, considering how things should have been versus how things were. Does that?
Yes, sir. I understand.
Sense?
Yes, sir. I understand. I agree. Again, I didn't self pursue that because I deem our company to run prudently and efficiently. So I think we did our best, the very best case scenario that we could execute under the circumstances. I trust my colleagues to have done so. So again, I look at the numbers just as numbers, and I regret that we couldn't procure more energy in the market for our customers. So I wish this number was higher. I wish we didn't have rolling blackouts. So
I understand.
Yes, I like to keep the power on.
I understand. Well, I believe that's all the questions I have. I guess, since this is a fuel-based proceeding, certainly this would be a part of that. And maybe Chair Bells or some of the others have thoughts on, how that occurs absent the conclusion of these investigations. But Madam Chair, I have no more questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Caston. Commissioner Carolee Williams.
Thank you, Chair Belser. Good afternoon. It is really pretty awesome to see a panel of women, so I'm glad you're here and representing your organization. My questions are at least going to start with Witness Harrington, so sure. My apologies to the other two of you, but thank you for being there to support her. I, too, want to look at Exhibit 2, and I want to look at page 2, and actually, it's Exhibit 2 and Exhibit 3. Because what I found myself doing is comparing September, October, November, December, January of 2022 to 2023 in terms of the power purchase on line 29. And so far, I'm not saying anything you have to track. This is really for everybody's awareness. So looking at the past, and then I looked on 3 at line 4, which is purchase power, and compared those to what you're projecting for September 2023 to January 2024. Are those, my first question is just, does that make sense to compare, to look at the past and look at the future?
Yes, ma'am. I think you are, could I point out specific numbers? So I know you might have narrowed in on certain months, but
Before you do that, let me ask my
Sure.
questions, and then you'll
Sure.
answer them, I'm
Okay.
sure. Generally what I see is that the future is significantly lower
Yes,
than the
ma'am.
past, with I think one exception. And so I'd just like you to talk about how you identified those. And of course, this is kind of with a goal of also zeroing in on December. But I found it. I'd like for you to do it from the perspective of the broader period, because it wasn't just one month that was significantly less, and so I suspect there are some other factors.
Oh yes. Well, it would be the factor we're all well aware of is the exorbitant gas prices that we've had over the past 12 months. So all of our actuals reflect those very high gas prices. And now this is purchase power, but again, if we're buying purchases in the market economically, but the supplier is burning gas, then those higher gas prices are reflected in those purchase power costs. So I'm saying gas, but even it's just purchases we make from someone else who's burning that gas. And then the forecast on the horizon looks like the gas prices are going down. So that is the driver of the delta of the large year-over-year disparity.
So then zero in on December and talk more about that
The 85.
difference, because that is $85 million that was spent in December of 2022. And what I see on line 4 of Exhibit 3 is $27,480,685. So, approximately a $60 million difference between what was used in December of 2022 and what is projected.
Yes, I see that also.
For December of 2023. And if you can talk some about that difference in terms of the impact of what we know happened in December of 2022.
Yes, I do see the values you're speaking of. I would not, I do think progressively into the future we are just seeing gas prices decline and then other commodity prices decline as well. So I think that's part of this. I think some of this could be, and I hate to speculate, but I want to give you an answer. Some of it could be some timing of what fell on the books in the month of December versus November of the actual period. And some of it also could be in the prospective period. There could be some contracts that are scripted for us into the future to roll out or roll off at a certain time. So sometimes it's not always 1 month of 1 year is apples for apples, the same month of the prior year. And then also, as we noted, load was just very high during our cold stretch. So just if you look down a few lines on Exhibit 2, page, let's see, this is my exhibit, forgive me, the header's over my page. I think I'm trying to look at December, the 85 million, which is this. Page 2 of 3, Exhibit 2, page 2 of 3.
Right.
Line 30. If you go down to line 34, you can see the volumes are a lot higher. Now, I am noticing the volumes are high in January as well, and the purchases go down.
And
yeah, I mean, I'd have to look and see who's supplying those purchases and what is the how much of it is like JDA, which is of course an in-house purchase, one affiliate to another, versus a market purchase, versus a reliability, which we've already spoken to. I don't believe there were any reliability purchases in January. There were none. So it would take some drilling, but I think one reason why we do see, say, November of 22 to December of 22, you can see the load increase there, but why it doesn't taper back down commensurately between December 22 and January of 23 would take some more analysis. And I'm just wondering if there wasn't some paperwork overlap that put it into the month of December, but I'd have to analyze it and see.
Take a look at September of 2022, 72 million there.
Yes.
So again, as you said, I think more analysis would be needed. But when I look at, what do you think the difference is between September of 2022 and December of 2022, other than hot and cold weather?
Well, I think hot and cold weather's enough. And then, well, that's the demand. Hot and cold weather equals demand. I don't want to use those words as if there's two. Market prices, price to supply our own. Again, I'm kind of speculating because I'm not the decision maker on supplying the energy.
Well, when I look at those two and I think about your 6.6 million for reliability, it becomes a little bit more understandable to me. And I look at, I mean, I'm apples and oranges looking between a hot month and a cold month, but to see, I mean, that actually makes me want to ask, well, what was happening, and was there reliability purchase in September?
Right. Well, the load is commensurate.
Right.
So, yes, their costs are higher in December, but more so respective to the load increase. Right. And again, that load is short of what it would have been had we had more purchases to make.
And I'm appreciate. I've taken that far enough. I want to go back to something that you said to Commissioner Williams. So while the reliability report was reliability purchase was 6.6 million.
Yes, ma'am.
The DEP amount that is attributed to South Carolina is 600,000.
It's approximately 10%. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. But exhibits, and this gets back to the question I've asked a few times that I may need you to help me with. Exhibits 2 and 3 are DEP-wide and not South Carolina specific.
That's correct. There's a few lines on here that are South Carolina specific. They get to the bottom third of each schedule.
Yes.
Is the South Carolina specific, but the top numbers we're referring to our system.
Okay. I know this is at least my second time to do this, but it gets a little bit easier, and I remember more every time, and I pledge I'll keep doing that.
May I point out one thing?
Please do.
Thank you. I also noticed if you look at the value beneath the 85 million, it's almost twice as high. Now those would most likely.
Will you identify what we're looking at?
Yes, ma'am. It is. This is again Exhibit 1, page 2 of 3. It is.
We were on Exhibit 2. You're now on Exhibit 1.
I'm sorry. My header is
That's
typed
okay.
over my
Ours
page
is
number.
We understand.
It should be the actual period, December 22nd. I guess it's Exhibit 1's my rates. Exhibit 2 is my costs. So Exhibit 2, page 2 of 3. We were looking at December 2022, line 30. Line 29. If we look, the one thing I wanted to point out was line 31. $80 million of fuel recovered through intersystem sales.
Excuse me, that's line 30.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. I just want the record to be clear, if you don't mind.
Thank you. That would be our sales, most likely, majority would be our sales to DEC. So it's like we're spending,
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Let me catch up.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
Line 30 is on Exhibit 2, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And that's the fuel expense recovered through intersystem sales.
Right. That is the number beneath the 85. So the 85 million of purchase power we've been talking about, it's the number below it.
Yes. So we're December 2022. Okay.
So that's our fuel recovered through intersystem sales. So we're selling as much as we're buying.
Okay.
Which does net you down to, well, if we could share our benefits economically dispatched with DEC and respectively. Some of our prices to them may be in 85 and their prices to us are in 79. And the net there is $6 million. There's your reliability purchases. So I'm just making a generality,
May-
but,
May I question that?
yes.
But is that line 30, fuel expense through intersystem sales, that includes self-generated power, does it not? That's not just for purchase power, does it?
What do you mean self-generated? It's the sales we're making to the public or DEC as our counterparty.
Correct.
Yes.
That you generated
Yes.
through your own facilities.
That's what I'm suggesting.
Okay. But purchase power is power that you have either purchased on the market or purchased from DEC.
Right.
DEC. And so
They're the inverse.
I don't know that fuel expense recovered through intersystem sales. Are you saying that recovers everything except the reliability purchases?
That's a
from
generality.
purchase?
I'm just trying to look at the blow.
Yeah, we can make the numbers fit anywhere,
Yeah.
but I mean, when you sell to other utilities, are y'all is DEP selling power that it generated or power that it purchased?
Some of both sometimes, but more likely that we self-generated. But it's mostly to DEC. It's primarily, especially, primarily to DEC. That's the nature of our joint dispatch. But I just wanted to point that out because as the purchase row looks exorbitantly high compared to the prior months and the subsequent months, so do the intersystem sales. So I think of them as polar opposites of one another because it's either intersystem, meaning we purchased from a counterparty, or intersystem sales, we sold to a counterparty. So I think of them as very much I think of them as netting, but I've never done the purchases world.
I'm sorry to have interrupted, Commissioner. Thank you.
No, Chair Belzer, I know what you said earlier about late filed exhibits, and we may not need one when this hearing is over, but given the conversation that we've had, I would welcome a late filed exhibit. We may be able to avoid it through testimony in the rest of this docket. So,
what are you wanting?
I would like a discussion. I would like testimony, I guess, if that's possible, on comparing, really on Exhibit 2, and the relationship of the purchase power, what the fuel expense recovered through intersystem sales is, and how that in particular relates to Winter Storm Elliott.
Okay.
Do you understand what she's asking for?
I think so. Yes, I mean, I think it's tricky because there's a lot. I mean, it can be done, but you're looking at a specific day, a specific hour, drilling down
Right.
in, but it can be done.
And I heard discussion between Chair Belzer and Commissioner Caston that I think ought to be added into that late filed exhibit, but I'm not going to be able to put the words into it. Talking about the delta, the difference between, and
I know what you mean.
so I think we may need to collaboratively ask for the late filed exhibit.
Sure. Yes. So are you, would we need to sort that? Would you guys want to phrase that, or do you want me to try to figure that out
I think we need to try to figure out, give you a little better instruction so you're not spinning your wheels
Right,
on something
exactly.
that's not what we want. So,
Okay.
I think the only way I know how to get there, Commissioner, is to have a discussion with the witness, if that's okay, so that we can figure out what's available. I will say that I've asked staff to pull that monthly fuel report. Now,
Okay.
whether or not we're going to use that, they're just trying to make copies, but
Sure.
that's filed in a docket here. So,
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Caston.
I guess what's going through my head, because I honestly feel like when I was listening to Ms. Harrington trying to describe, what would be required, how it would be done, it made sense, and I generally agrees with it. But I also know that there's these ongoing investigations. And I honestly just don't know how do we need the information from the investigations first, or is that even plausible? Or is it the kind of thing while that's going on, we simply ask for this additional information concurrent with the ongoing investigation? Does that make sense at all?
Yes, that does. But we're back to the question I asked at the beginning of the hearing, Commissioner Caston, when I asked the parties of whether we're going forward with approving the fuel cost here. And then if the investigation comes back, we don't know what that's going to show. It may show that there was no imprudence, that Duke did everything 100% right. And that that's my concern is this. We don't have the results of the investigation. We don't know what the investigation may show as far as prudence or imprudence, or everything's fine. And to approve the fuel cost here without the results of the investigation, how do we claw that back if there is an issue of imprudence? That's my concern. And I'm not saying Duke did. I think Duke is a great company. I think Duke provides wonderful service. But there are going to be mishaps regardless of how good you are, right, that things are going to happen. That doesn't mean that Duke's a bad company. I'm not saying that. But we do have to look after the ratepayer, and that's the concern. And if you've read, and I know some of y'all have, probably all of you have read the testimony of ORS's witness that has specific recommendations and has made some suggestions that could be viewed as imprudence. So where do we go from there, folks?
Madam Chair, and I realize maybe procedurally this is a little, since this is not cross-examination, but I would say, we certainly would be willing to talk with the company at the next break and see if there's a proposal that we could come up with in short order that might address some of those concerns. Haven't had a chance to talk with that with the company, so I certainly don't know. But we do have a thought or two about how that could occur. I understand the lateness of the hour as well, so but at least throw that out there that we might be willing to, or might be able to talk with the company and see if there's a path forward.
Ms. Brown, is that something that we could ask y'all to discuss?
We're happy to do that, Commissioner.
I mean, we've been going about an hour and a half. Would it help to take a 15-minute break? Ms. Harrington has been wonderfully responsive to our questions, and her patience has been outstanding, and we greatly appreciate that. But that's my personal quandary is
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Caston.
I agree with that, and I have the very same concern you do. And if you are okay with that or a suggestion, because,
Okay, let's do this, Commissioner, if we can.
Yes.
It is, I can't, every clock in here is different. It's 3:55. Let's come back at 4:15 per iPhones, if you got iPhones. AT&T, well, Farmers Telephone iPhone. We'll come back at 4:15, give y'all a chance to talk, stretch your legs a second, and come back. Ladies, y'all will still be on a panel. I'm going to ask that you not discuss your testimony with anyone or let anyone discuss it with you. And someday I'll tell you why I phrased that way. There's an experience there.
Madam Chair, I don't know if it would be appropriate now or after we get back from the break, or maybe even during the break, with discussion with all parties, just to kind of have a housekeeping discussion of kind of timing. We do have schedules that we're trying to work through. One of our witnesses is in Greece, so she's,
what time is it there?
I believe it's 4 o'clock, so it's 7 hours ahead. So,
oh gosh. Okay.
But she's certainly available. I just wanted to.
No. Well, and honestly, and I don't know that we're going to finish today. Okay.
Well,
Let me
and
just
that's
put
kinda
that.
what I
Let
wanted
me
to
put
talk
it. Let me
about,
put it that way. We do have another hearing in the morning. So if we don't finish today, my proposal would be we start back at 2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. Does that help any?
It does.
For planning purposes?
It does. Well, let me just confirm, and then
Yes.
we'll
I mean,
talk
y'all
about
can
that.
all talk about that, but that's where we are.
Okay.
We'll go for a while, yeah, but still.
Sure.
We are in recess now until 4:17. Gives you Good afternoon, and we are returning to the Public Service Commission following an afternoon break in docket number 2023-1-E. Let's take a roll call of commissioners. Present in the hearing room, we have Commissioner Justin Williams, Vice Chair Powers, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Carol Lee Williams, Chair Belser, and with us virtually we have Commissioner Irvin and Commissioner Caston. Parties, thank you for taking a few moments to talk. Do y'all have anything y'all want to report to us before we start back with questions for the witnesses, or how we want to proceed? Or is there anything to report? Mr. Trawick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We appreciate the commission giving us that time to go huddle up with the parties. We are going to propose a stipulation that I suppose we'll later reduce to writing and file with the commission. And that proposal would be that the company recover the costs in this proceeding, but give all parties the ability to challenge them at a later rate proceeding, whether that be a base rate proceeding or the next fuel proceeding, while ORS is completing its investigation into Winter Storm Elliott.
Okay. Let me just check with the parties. Is that everybody's understanding? Nucor? Was CCL included in the discussion? Do they know about it?
They were not. The virtual.
CCL. Did you hear what Mr. Trawick had said about stipulation?
I did. Thank you, Chair Welchers. This is Kate Mixon. And we wouldn't have any objection to that stipulation, assuming.
Thank you. Assuming. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was going to say, pending kind of seeing it in writing, but.
Understand. Pending you seeing it in writing, you kind of, something happened with the sound there. Nucor, you're in agreement with that?
We're in agreement. Yes, Madam Chair.
ORS, you're in agreement with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank y'all for the discussion. I think that will help.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
But we're still going to push forward today.
And so, Madam Chair, could I just talk about the schedule just very briefly?
Mr. Mustian, yes, sir.
Thank you. So we do have a witness, Shane Hyatt, who has been scheduled to go on vacation tomorrow.
I'm sorry. Just teasing.
Well, I was planning on going on vacation too. However, I'll be here. So, but my request would be, obviously, I don't know how long the commission is going to go this evening. My request would be if we could take Mr. Thompson and Mr. Hyatt out of order, have them up first this evening or this afternoon. We've talked with Dr. Rimpani. She's available to go tomorrow. And then Mr. Brazino and Mr. Lawyer would be tomorrow.
I'd like to try to finish by 6 today if possible.
Okay.
So once we finish with this panel, we'll jump right in. I don't think there are any other witnesses before we get to ORS, so we can jump into those.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is that agreeable with the parties? About 6?
Yes,
Okay.
Madam Chair. And if I may, one follow-up, all those costs would be just the ones specific to Winter Storm Elliott. I can't remember if I said that or not, but just want to make that clear for the record.
Thank you. Clarification is always good. Thank you, Mr. Trawick.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Let's see. We were kind of in commissioner questions. Commissioner Williams, were you still up?
I was. I have a few other questions
Okay.
I'd like to ask. To any of the panelists, do you feel that the company has an incentive to keep fuel cost as low as possible, in addition to reasonable and prudent, and why?
Absolutely. I think the company, just as the commission in here and the commission in North Carolina, we're all in this thing together. We're all serving our customer. You're serving your constituents. We're serving our customers, and they're the same individuals. So we're all always looking out for their best interests. We're customers as well. So, the right hand benefits the left hand because we're all connected. So, absolutely. And were there to be fuel cost over collection, such as what we've seen over the last couple of years, the company has to finance that. And so it's not, regulatory lag doesn't work in the company's favor. So it is in our best interest to minimize regulatory lag and get our fuel costs forecasted as accurately as we can possibly foresee, barring unforeseen circumstances such as a random winter storm of the magnitude that we just recently had that was unforeseeable. So it is in the country's best interest to mitigate reg lag and tighten up the estimates with actuals as much as can humanly be done.
I've forgotten. Remind me, if there is an overcollection, what happens? Is there a time frame for it to be
It's
identified?
the 12-month subsequent bill period is typically when we.
So there's nothing in a shorter time period. Okay.
Not typically, no, ma'am.
Okay. This is really minor, but I was looking at the lighting and the 0.05% increase.
Yes, ma'am.
And just thinking about lighting getting more and more efficient, because is the lighting category, is that typically municipal public lighting?
Do you know anything about lighting rate schedules?
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Sure. The lighting category, I just, is that typically municipal lighting?
Yes.
Okay. And the 0.05% is infinitely lower than every other cost increase in this fuel docket, correct?
On paper it is. We're following the same methodology as directed in the fuel statute. So you are asked earlier, how do we allocate costs between North Carolina and South Carolina? We allocate on the basis of billed sales. So the billed kilowatt hour sales that are sold and posted to the general ledger in the month that the bills are recognized is the quantifier between allocating fuel costs in that month to North Carolina or South Carolina or wholesale.
Okay.
Now, as for the lighting, to return back to your lighting question, once those fuel costs are allocated based on billed sales, then we further allocate the explicit costs across the different rate, like the different exhibits that I have. We have the capacity related, the environmental, the DERP avoided, and the DERP incremental. Those costs are allocated to the South Carolina retail customer classes on the firm peak demand of the prior calendar year. So if lighting's rate delta is what it is, that methodology has not changed. We have always allocated on firm peak demand of the prior calendar year. Now, as stated in my testimony, the definition of that has changed in the last few months based on the ruling in the previous rate case to convert from a 1 CP peak to an average 12-month CP peak.
So it has absolutely nothing to do with LED lighting and the more efficient lighting that is being installed in municipal areas.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Glad I got that idea removed from my brain. You answered my next question in advance. This may not be a question for you all, but I hope it is. Tell me about the challenges to prepare the forecast within 30 days. I think you all identified that you couldn't do that, but you did it in like 46 or something like that. Would that be you all, or was that somebody else who's already testified?
That's me, yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Now, I'm not a forecast preparer. I'm the end user to prepare the forecasted rates, but we did consult with our forecast analytics team last year when that requirement came to be, and we, it was a year ago, but we asked them what all their inputs were, when those inputs became available, how much manual labor, man-hours it took to generate each iteration that they needed to do to produce a forecast. And when I say iteration, I mean one run as a combined company, dispatching collectively, and then the parallel runs, dispatching individually to determine the savings, the joint dispatch savings and joint dispatch interchange. So they have to do 3 runs. And so we had to ask them how much man hour, once those inputs become available, can they do that manual labor, and then their analytics and their variance analysis to validate that the data is accurate and then be ready for our use. So that's approximately how long it took collectively to achieve the job with results we could trust.
And so would you imagine a similar situation next year? Because as I recall, the 30
Yes.
days was a goal. It was to try to reduce the volatility and because of the fast pace, especially last year, that things were changing. So would you imagine it's going to take 40-something days next year as well?
I would. I think we have
Okay.
tightened the strings as tightly as we could.
Okay.
There may be some overtime involved to achieve that. So I don't, and we have veteran staff doing it. So had we had any turnover, or in a future year have some turnover where the man hours aren't as veteran and they're trying to achieve the same task in the same amount of time, it could take longer. But barring anything like that, I think we're at the tightest window we could with results that we rely on.
Okay. Is there anything anybody else can do to tighten that up, scheduling wise, beyond the company? Is it a timing issue on our part?
No, I would say it is the availability of the data needed as inputs, and then the literal production of aggregating those inputs and running the 3 models I spoke
Right.
of. I would think in the future state, if we were ever a merged entity, it would be faster because you wouldn't have to do the 3 models. You could just go to the 1 model. So that's a future scenario that might benefit us with some expediency in forecasting. But until we reach that point, I'm not aware of anything else we could do to tighten it.
That makes sense. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
I think I have no further questions of you all. Appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Thomas?
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's getting a little bit late, but we're still going. Y'all are doing great. I had just a few questions. So, Ms. Harrington, you said something that confused me just a little bit, maybe more than one thing. But so at one point you were talking about, we were talking about the costs, and you mentioned revenues, and that the revenues would have been higher if the plants hadn't gone out or whatever, because it had been higher sales.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
And what confuses me about that is that we are in a fuel cost case. I don't really understand how the revenue would impact the fuel cost.
Okay. Well, the customer bill. So we set our bill rates. You all are judging on the proposed rates before us. Those rates are intended to achieve 2 things for us. 1, recover our under collection that is presently been financed by the company, that for the previously generated energy, previously supplied needs to customers. So we've got a revenue, we've got a shortfall, a cash shortfall on behalf of the company to date. But then we're also projecting costs for the prospective 12 months. So when we set those rates, you all approve those rates, and those customers are billed. We look back in our 12 months actual period to see how well the revenues, that's what I'm referring to, the sales we make and the revenues we collect from the customers based on the fuel rates you all approved last year, how well that marries up with the costs incurred during the same term of time. So we wouldn't have an over-under collection if there wasn't a relationship between the revenues and the costs. Is that helpful?
I guess to some degree, but the again, the point is that we're looking here at the cost, and then we're trying to figure out what's going to be the appropriate cost on a go-forward basis. And I would think that on a go-forward basis, you would be projecting normal billing, not the kind of thing that happened in December for your projection. You'd be projecting normal billing to occur, which would take into account normal fuel costs, which to me, I don't see how the lost revenue in December plays into that.
I think I answered with the revenue response in regard to would you have more fuel cost? And the answer is yes, because we would be supplying more sales. So if we're actually supplying more customers more electricity, we would be billing more and collecting more revenues. So yes, the cost would actually go up were we to supply more sales. We economically dispatch, so they would go up. So I think the question I responded to that from was, if all of our units had run, would you have incurred more fuel cost? And the answer is yes, because we would have generated more electricity. And I responded by saying we would have collected more revenues. That's what I meant by we would have generated more electricity. We would have recovered more revenues, but we would have incurred more costs as well.
Right, but more costs at the normal level, not the purchase power higher rates.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes, sir. The 6.6 million that we've discussed, those were at a price per megawatt hour above what we would generate ourselves. That's correct.
Okay, so another thing that you mentioned is when we were looking at your exhibit in between the months, you said something to the effect that we had spillover between the months, so that you weren't really sure, what was going on. That's the way I heard you say it anyway. And so my question there is this schedule that's prepared under accrual accounting every month consistently with the other months? Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It's not accrual accounting. This is actual accounting. So these are actual. There is some accruals there are subsets of accruals that they will book an accrual, and then the subsequent month reverse it and book the actuals on top. So you just have that little delta between the accrual and the actual spilling over into the subsequent month. But I think what I was referring to here is anybody's books and records, any general ledger of any company is constrained on a monthly basis on the availability of a bill, the availability, of the receipt of an invoice, and the actual receipt of it and processing the payment. So these months are slotted by our reporting months, so our ledger months. And so if there is a spillover, it would be, like, for example, cycle billing. We have maybe 20 cycles, so different lots of customers receiving their bill on a cycle. So every month, in every month's billed sales, there's a spillover of the prior months that was received by customers in the latter half of the month, but posted to the books in the subsequent month, and it leapfrogs. So there's always a little bit of a transition between when something actually occurred and the reporting month. Is that helpful?
Well, yeah, I guess so. But again, it's to me, it's an accrual accounting thing, and that kind of stuff happens every month.
Right.
And so that's still over time. It should just pretty much be a wash. It should not cause you to say, well, that month's different from the next month for the reason that you just gave. That doesn't work in my brain.
Yes, sir. But in a month where we have an abnormal month, like December of 2022, you could see it more recognizably if that's occurring because the drivers behind it are larger. So I think it always happens. It happens, like I said, every company's books and records, just the timing of receipts and payments and that kind of thing. So I agree with you. It normally washes out. It's a normal course of business.
All righty. Well, I wanted to look at one number on your, I think this is Exhibit 2. I've lost track of which one it is. It's the one we've been talking about with the $85 million in December. That's not the number I'm talking about. I want to talk about line 44. Line 44.
Yes, sir.
December actual.
Mm-hmm.
The $5 and basically 46 cents.
Yes, sir.
And just how vastly different that is between the other months. And again, we're talking about South Carolina only, and the cost per kilowatt hour. And that to me is kind of where stuff comes in focus that we've been talking about. To me, that just kind of, that just really shines the spotlight on what we've been talking about without much in the way of distractions.
Yes, sir. I agree. Did you want me to comment on it, or?
You're welcome to comment.
I agree, and I just would look all the way up the column, and you can see all the cost categories, not distinctly purchased power, but all of our other fuel expenditures were of higher cost in that month. It was just a month of very high demand, both internally and externally. So I think that is appearing here.
Okay. Appreciate that. All right, so I had just one more thought or question, and this is not really directed at you, and I'm not really looking for an answer right now, but this is just at the audience and the stipulation to come and what we're going to get out of that, what we're going to see. To me, the real thing that we're looking for, at least for me, is what was the cost of the power that was purchased that occurred as a result of the plant outages or derates for DEP in South Carolina during Winter Storm Elliott. That's about the best way I know to sum it up. And then the other thing that I would like to also see is what would the cost have been if the generation had occurred in the economic dispatch model. So a comparison of what happened, what you paid, and what it would have been if things had been normal.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. May I ask, is this the late file exhibit request you all would like?
I'm asking the same
I do not know where it's going to come from, but you all mentioned this stipulation and numbers that were going to be provided. That might be the place. It might be the late file. Might be both.
It would have to, I think, be a late filed exhibit, Commissioner. But Commissioner Williams?
I'm drafting a potential request for a late filed exhibit that I will coordinate with a couple of commissioners.
We'll have that tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank
that
you.
will help me.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Commissioners, further questions for this panel? Last chance. Hearing none, Mr. Trawick, redirect.
None, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ladies, thank you very much for your testimony and your patience with us this afternoon. We certainly appreciate the information you provided.
Thanks.
You may stand down.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Trawick.
If I might, the company would ask that Tom Simrell and Kevin Houston be excused.
At your peril.
Of course, as well as Ms. Hibbert, Ms. Harrington, and Ms. Fleener.
Yes, sir.
And we'll have Mr. Clay available.
Thank you.
Mr. McClay available.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe they can beat some of the traffic. Anything else from the company?
DEP rests.
Okay. Just for housekeeping, do you think we'll have a written stipulation by 2 p.m. tomorrow?
I think so.
Okay. That's the goal anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Nucor? No witnesses. Say CCL? No witnesses?
That's right, Chair Bellstar.
Thank you, ma'am. Office of Regulatory Staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. ORS calls Mr. Amari Thompson, Mr. Shane Hyatt as his first panel.
Gentlemen, before you're sworn in, I would say go ahead and turn your microphones on before Madam Chair has to chastise you. So I'll chastise you for her.
If you would raise your right hands. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Thompson, we'll start with you. Could you please state your full name for the record, please?
Samari Rashad Thompson.
Okay. And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by the Office of Regulatory Staff as a regulatory analyst.
Okay. And Mr. Thompson, did you prepare or cause to be prepared 7 pages of direct testimony in this docket?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Do you have any changes, corrections, or edits to your testimony?
No, I do not.
If I were to ask you those same questions posed in your direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Okay. Madam Chair, I would ask that Mr. Thompson's pre-filed direct testimony be marked and entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Thompson's direct pre-file testimony will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
And Mr. Thompson, did you pre-file 6 exhibits marked as ORT 1 through ORT 6 in this docket?
Yes, I did.
And on June 13th, did you file a corrected exhibit ORT-3?
Yes, I did.
And did you file a corrected ORT-5 on June 26, 2023?
Yes, I did.
All right. Other than those documents, so those changes, do you have any additional changes, edits, or deletions to your exhibits?
No, I do not.
Okay. Madam Chair, I would move that Mr. Thompson's pre-filed exhibits ORT 1 through 6, including corrected ORT 3 and 5, be marked and entered into the record as the next hearing exhibit.
Mr. Mustian?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you want the original 3 and 5 included or just the corrected?
No, ma'am, I apologize. Just the corrected would be sufficient.
Mr. Thompson's exhibits marked ORT 1, 2, 3 corrected, 4, 5 corrected, and 6 will be a composite exhibit marked for identification as hearing exhibit 8 and received into the evidence of this case.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Thompson, did you prepare a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
All right, could you provide that at this time?
Sure. Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and members of the Commission. The purpose of my direct testimony is to set forth ORS's recommendations resulting from ORS's examination and review of Duke Energy Progress's power plant operations used in the generation of electricity to meet the company's retail customer requirements during the review period. In preparation for this proceeding, ORS examined various fuel and performance documents related to the company's electric generation and power plant outage and maintenance activities. ORS analyzed the company's monthly fuel reports, including power plant performance data, heat rate data, unit outages, and generation statistics. ORS also monitored electric generation statistics through industry and governmental publications. ORS reviewed the annual assessment letters, plant performance data, and presentations from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's 2022 annual assessment meetings for the Sharon Harris, Brunswick, and Robinson nuclear plants. Additionally, ORS met virtually with the company personnel from various departments to discuss and review the company's electric generation, power plant outages, and maintenance activities. Based on ORS's review of the company's operation of its generation facilities during the actual period of March 2022 through February 2023, ORS determined that the company made reasonable efforts to maximize unit availability and minimize fuel costs. ORS found the company's plant outages to be reasonable based on ORS's review of the outage data from the actual period, forecasted outage data from docket number 2022-1-E, historical outage data from the previous annual fuel proceedings, and industry experience. ORS also found the company's maintenance schedules and projected performance data for its power plants for the estimated period of March 2023 through July 2023, and the forecasted period of August 2023 through July 2024 to be reasonable. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Hyatt, could you please state your full name for the record?
Donald Shane Hyatt.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm a regulatory analyst at the Office of Regulatory Staff.
Okay. And in connection with this proceeding, did you pre-file 11 pages of redacted and confidential direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Do you have any changes, corrections, or deletions to that testimony?
No, I do not.
Okay, if I were to ask you the same questions posed in your pre-filed testimony, would your answers today be the same?
Yes, they would.
Madam Chair, I would ask that Mr. Hyatt's 11 pages of pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand, and I do believe the Commission has already ruled, if I recall correctly, on the confidential version, but would ask that that version remain under seal at this time.
Mr. Hyatt's pre-filed direct testimony will be admitted to the record as if given orally from the stand, and the confidential version will be maintained confidential under seal.
Okay. Mr. Hyatt, did you also pre-file 5 exhibits with your direct testimony marked as DSH1 through DSH5?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and do you have any changes, additions, or deletions to those exhibits?
No, I do not.
Okay, Madam Chair, I would ask that Mr. Hyatt's exhibits be marked and entered into the record as the next hearing exhibit.
Mr. Hyatt's exhibits denoted DSH1 through DSH5 will be marked for identification as hearing exhibit 9 and received into the evidence of this case.
Mr. Hyatt, did you prepare a summary of your testimony, and if so, could you provide it at this time?
Yes, I did. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. My testimony sets forth ORS's findings and recommendations resulting from its examination of Duke Energy Progress's fuel expenses used in the generation of electricity to meet its retail customer requirements. ORS examined various fuel-related documents that address the company's fuel, environmental, and purchase power expenses for the actual, estimated, and forecasted periods. ORS analyzed the company's monthly fuel reports and examined the company's contracts for nuclear fuel, coal, natural gas, fuel oil, transportation, environmental reagents, purchase power, and the changes related to fuel contracts. ORS evaluated the company's policies and procedures for fuel procurement, transportation, forecasting, hedging, and any changes related to its policies and procedures. Additionally, ORS utilizes industry and government publications to monitor current market conditions and trends for the nuclear, coal, natural gas, transportation, and renewable industries. ORS also met virtually with company personnel from various departments as part of its review. ORS reviewed the company's projected sales and analyzed them with regard to the projections from its last fuel proceeding and the actual sales from the actual period. ORS found the company's sales projections to be reasonable. ORS reviewed the company's forecasted costs in nuclear fuel, coal, natural gas, fuel oil, transportation, environmental reagents, and purchase power for the estimated and forecasted period. ORS compared the monthly projected cost to historical projections, actual data, and commodity prices from numerous industry publications. ORS found the company's forecasted costs to be reasonable. Should the Commission approve the rates as proposed by the company, the average monthly bill for residential customers on RES rate using 1,000 kilowatt hours would increase from $148.18 to approximately $153.73, a net increase of $5.55, or 3.75%. For general service non-demand and general service demand customers, the proposed rates would increase the average monthly bills by approximately 1.2 and 2.5% respectively. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, gentlemen. Madam Chair, the witnesses are available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mustian. Nucor, South Carolina, questions for this panel?
No questions, Madam Chair.
CCL SACE, any questions for this panel?
No questions.
Duke, any questions for this panel?
No, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Commissioners, questions for these witnesses? Commissioner Carolee Williams.
Thank you, Chair Belzer. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
It's hard to keep going at this. Having said that, Mr. Hyatt, will you talk to us some about the gas hedging program and what you found from your analysis?
Sure. So as part of my review, I looked at the hedging program holistically from the time of its inception to see, its success rate. Because, and while the numbers are confidential and can be found in my confidential testimony, page 10, lines 13 through 16. We did find that there's ebbs and flows, there's costs some years, there's gains some years, and ultimately the end result is that there is a gain this year and a loss for the program as a whole.
And do you have any testimony regarding kind of its overall benefits?
My testimony refers to just the overall system costs, and those numbers are in my confidential testimony.
And not the program as a whole?
I don't testify to the program as a whole. I do have a general understanding of how the program works.
Okay. I may have another question for you, Mr. Thompson, but I'm going to let another colleague go next.
Commissioners, questions? Mr. Thompson, I have a couple of questions, if you don't mind. Mr. Thompson, on page 5 of your testimony, in response to a question at the bottom of page 4 of explain how outages are represented in your exhibits, you indicate that you've summarized outages that last 7 or more days, but all outages are reviewed. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And at this time, has ORS investigated or reviewed any outages or deratings as may have occurred during Winter Storm Elliott?
We did review that, and we employed the use of a third-party consultant, Dr. Rampani, who will probably testify to the specifics of, Winter Storm Elliott and what we found.
Okay.
But for the purposes of my review, we evaluated their operation and maintenance. We evaluated their policies and procedures and the work performance actions they took, and we found it to be reasonable.
Okay. But there is still an ongoing investigation being conducted by ORS with regard to
That's correct.
The events of Winter Storm Elliott and the
Yes,
results.
I'm sorry.
Okay. No, you're fine. It's fine. And I believe, do you have an estimate on when that investigation will be complete? I have a recollection of a letter coming in maybe the end of May saying about 60 days. Does that sound correct? You don't need to look over there. They can't coach you right now. But I'm not
to check. That sounds right.
Does that sound about right? So sometime before or around August, the beginning of August, do you think?
Yes, it should be coming soon.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Hyatt, I don't want to leave you out. Let me flip to your testimony here.
Sure. I mean, you can leave me out if you want to.
That's okay. On page 7 of your testimony, you indicate toward the bottom of the page that tell me about the primary drivers of the requested increase in fuel cost for this case.
Sure. So the primary drivers not only include their undercollected balance, but as I think Mr. McClay talked about, the coal prices were higher than average because of supply issues. The natural gas prices were higher than average because of global demand and national demand, and then the geopolitical events that took place last year.
And you indicated in your testimony that ORS utilizes a number of trade publications to track fuel prices or cost of gas and coal and other commodities. And what are you seeing with regard to the natural gas from what we've seen over the last couple of years?
So the trend is downward. And while there has been a recent sort of downtick in production, it hasn't caused the market to fluctuate too incredibly much. So it's still a downward trend, but
And
kind of
OR,
volatile.
okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
And ORS is, I'm switching gears on you a little bit here. ORS still is a proponent of the company providing quarterly fuel forecasts to ORS and interested parties. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you. Commissioners, questions for this panel? Hearing none. Mr. Mustian, any
No-
redirect?
No redirect.
Okay, gentlemen, you may stand down. Thank you. I know I said we would go till 6, but we've been going all day. Does it suit you to put up your 3 witnesses tomorrow afternoon?
I think that would be fine, Madam Chair. Yes,
Does that work for the other parties? I'm not trying to delay this, but I think I'm pretty tired. I don't know about y'all. So, with that, we will.
Chair Belzer?
Yes, sir. Mr. Lavonga. Sorry. I don't know if you plan to be here tomorrow, did you?
You read my mind.
Sorry.
Get this working.
We wouldn't finish today anyway.
Is it on? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I do have to return to Washington tomorrow morning, so Mr. Smith is going to be here, but I wanted to see if I could participate
You may-
virtually.
Yes, you may.
Okay.
Just if you would just make sure that our folks in the back have your contact information. They may need you to send an email or something, but you may certainly participate virtually, and it's always good to see you.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You will excuse you to participate virtually. How about that?
Thanks very much.
Madam Chair, I'm glad he said that because I did forget, and at my peril, and but primarily so that Mr. Hyatt can enjoy himself tomorrow while we're all busy at work, I would ask that Mr. Hyatt and Mr. Thompson be excused.
Well, as much as I hate to not have them here to join us, they may be excused at your peril.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
If we're all here, everybody ought to join in the fun, right?
I feel confident Mr. Hyatt will be watching it.
With bated breath, I'm sure. Are there any other matters that need to come before us this afternoon? And, okay. Thank y'all. Appreciate your courtesies and putting up with us today, and me in particular. And we will recess until 2 p.m. tomorrow. Thank you. We are in recess.